Hello, Sylvie Albert. I'm here with my friend and colleague Al McLeod, a expert on innovation, and the discussion in this third video is about leadership. So three things that I think Al and I agree on in terms of leadership is, first of all, you need to have a vision in terms of what your expectations are with regards to innovation and, so from a short-term, long-term perspective. And you also need to understand your own business model and have others understand the business model so that they can help you contribute to the solutions of where you need to go. So there is a lot of training and development and mentoring and so forth that is needed there. And then you need people in engagement, and that means strategic leadership that people are willing to follow and are going to be contributing to the direction in terms of innovation. So we come back again. Where are we on the 8 essential steps, Al?
Yeah, so back to our model again, the McKinsey 8 Essentials model. And we're talking about evolve and accelerate today in our discussion.
Excellent. So we talked about these three models in our previous video. And, depending on what kind of innovation vision that you develop in terms of, all of those incremental and more strategic and disruptive innovations that you might want to bring forward in your organization might require different types of leaders, right? And also from a time horizon perspective, you have to think in terms of when you will need different types of leaders depending on what that strategy is all about. So important to, you've gone through the model to strategize, now to think in terms of the people side, how that transformation happens. And so what are we looking for in current leaders and developing future leaders, onboarding new people? Where we want, I think, creative people, people that are empathetic so that, they're willing to listen and understand, open-minded, practical, knowledgeable, good communicators, collaborative, resilient. Anything else that you want to add to this list, Al?
Patient.
Yeah.
So it's always a fight between patience and the need to get done when you're an internal innovator. So I would say, knowing when to be a little patient and knowing when to really push is important.
Right. And, coming back to this business model canvas that we talked about under strategy, what's the impact here in terms of leadership? Like, what is it that we need?
Well, you really need to understand your business model very well. The leadership needs to understand the business model very well and educate their team so that everybody understands what they're working with. They need to also understand how well their business is doing. They need to understand their industry. And frankly, they need to understand their competitors.
Right.
That's very, very important. But it starts with the business model.
Right. So there's a foundation in forming people to really participate and contribute. Right. So let's talk about this group definition canvas. So we say, like, to evolve and accelerate, we want to understand the innovation system.
Yeah. So I wish I had this available to me when I had started an innovation group within a company. This was developed by an organization called LPK, a US-based company, and I had the pleasure of working with them and the privilege of working with them. They asked me if I would get engaged. I was one of, I'm sure, many that they talked to, and they interviewed me, and I got to comment on the content as they're building it. And I think it's a terrific tool. It's based on the business model canvas, of course. They took the business model canvas and they said, how could we apply that canvas type thinking to creating an innovation group? So if you're going to either create an innovation group as a leader, or if you're going to restart an innovation group as a leader, or look at what's my next iteration, this is a great tool. There are many pages. I think it's about a 33-page or 35-page document behind this. Now, this is the end result when you come up with the canvas, the single-page canvas. And so at the end of this, you've got your organization, who is your customer, So this is the viewpoint from you as the innovation leader. So what is my team doing for the organization? So the organization is on the left side, the innovation group is on the right side, and in the middle is the value proposition, just like in the business model canvas. And so what you really want to do is document the expectations and the needs of the company on the left side, and the activities and functions and roles you're going to perform on the right side. And that, of course, the value proposition is where they meet. On the bottom left is in the fifth box is where you set up your expectations, your income, your outcomes, metrics, all those kind of things. And on the right side, bottom, is where you establish your cost structure. What's my budget? How much is it going to cost? Very, very important to have that established and understood and agreed to by everybody. But once you finish this canvas, this quite a bit of work, I would recommend, if you can, talk to LPK about using it and actually hire them to help you go through it, because it is a lot of work, that you will have a very well understood agreement between yourself and the rest of the leadership of the company on what your innovation team is going to do.
Right. So in effect, is it a little bit like setting broad goals on one side and then all the projects and objectives on the other side? Or
It's more about the needs of the organization and the internal relationships you have. So what is it that why has this group been established? That's really what this is set out to do. So why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And so on the left side is why we're doing this, and on the right side is what we're going to do,
Right.
which meets in the middle to say our value proposition is this. And so at the end of it, you've got your leadership team has given you very specifically what they expect you to do, and that's on the left-hand side, right?
very motivating and an excellent way to engage people.
Right, and it may change. So if it changes, you could say, well, hold it, this is what we said we were going to do, so now we're doing something different, and you can change it. If you start without something like this, you can end up after a year. What happens, by the way, is every year, budget year, it's what have you done for me?
Right.
Because that doesn't get maybe asked of the finance team, but it will be asked of the innovation team.
Exactly.
So you really have to be able to articulate what it is you set out to do and then what you did.
So in our previous video, we talked about the importance of stakeholders and the fact that you need them to establish your strategy.
Right.
But there's also different ways to lead and manage your stakeholders. So what would you say needs to be done there?
Well, so what we have here is the innovation ecosystem that we would establish. Any company needs to establish as part of its innovation strategy, and the leadership of the team will be the one who probably pushes for most of this innovation ecosystem. So if you're in a company that is very much in a high technology area, where there's a lot of scientific advancements coming, academic partnerships can be super important, can be the most important thing. Your customers, how do you engage with your customers to get ideas from them? Kind of like a Lego, or even someone like an Arm & Hammer baking soda, right? It used to be a 1 SKU or a 2 SKU company. Now they have lots and lots of products. Most of the ideas came from their customers. Your employees, other startups, how do you scout to make sure you understand what startups or tech startups are in your industry? Because they're talking to your competitors if they're not talking to you. And maybe they're talking to them anyway, but understanding that. So how about your value chain, like a Walmart? Walmart is great at value chain innovation. So these are all the different kinds of partners that you can have in your innovation ecosystem that can help you build those new business models and innovate. And so it's very important for the leadership to focus on this.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to think in terms of, who are your best people to interact with these various stakeholders, right? So,
Right.
Somebody that is working with academics may not have the same type of skill set and understanding and ways of managing their network than somebody who's dealing with customers, right? So different language, different approaches. And so I think it's really important to think in terms of who you want out there representing you, and how is this engaging for people on your team to get, to feel like they're part of the process and so forth. So there's a lot of questions that can be asked in terms of how you implement that strategy of going out there and doing more with stakeholders.
Right.
So this is a piece of research that was done by Pisano regarding, things that are important to consider in the governance of innovation to ensure that it runs successfully. So, I mean, the first one that everybody talks about is that toleration for failure. Because if people feel that, they're not going to be recognized, or worse, if something happens that fails, then that's quite problematic, because no one is going to come forward and want to do anything, right?
Right. I see failure as something that's quite complicated, because failure is something that you learn from. But failure needs to be understood that your objective is to make the failures small. If the failures are large, then you really need to learn, how did that failure become that big?
Right.
And so the idea is you use risk management to keep your failure opportunities small, so that when you do have a failure, it's something you could learn from, but it hasn't cost you $100 million.
Right.
So that's the idea. So for me, failure is something that you tolerate, but you also teach people. Because if people fail and they just move on without learning, that's truly failure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of systems, fail fast, fail cheap, where
Right.
you're testing
Yes.
innovations on an ongoing basis to try to minimize some of those risks. And that develops that toleration for failure, because it's okay to have, and probably a lot of it ends up in
Right.
failure.
Yes.
Before you hit that one big one, right?
Right.
And so, but you want that willingness to experiment, to keep going. So other things that Pisano talks about is that psychological safety with candor, meaning that you can't, in a way, mince words. You have to say it properly,
Right.
but at the same time you have to be honest, because if it's not going to work, you can't let it keep going on. A collaboration with individual accountability. So again, coming back to the idea that more minds makes for a better product, you have more diversity of ideas and so forth. So you need that collaboration, but people still have to be individually accountable,
Right.
And not point the finger at each other when something doesn't work. Flat but with strong leadership, and I think that addresses the issue that you got to give some people some leeway to make some decisions, right? So things that you can't tolerate: incompetence, protectionism. For example, letting people go on and on with bad behavior that doesn't get corrected, creates problems with the team. And so there's lots of those kinds of things that you have to make sure that you don't inadvertently create that will affect your innovation.
Right.
So another one that you love is that book on the growth mindset.
Yeah, the growth versus fixed mindset. To keep it really simple, there aren't people with a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. It's a continuum. You are more towards a growth mindset or more towards a fixed mindset. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I have to continually think about this. Understanding that failure is an opportunity to grow versus being terrified of failure and
Right.
looking bad or looking stupid or something like that. Knowing that it's okay to fail, knowing that you can learn to do things. Right, I don't know how to do that. Right, you've heard people say, "I don't know how to do that,"
Yeah.
and they're stuck there. That's a fixed mindset. I love people who take feedback constructively versus take it very personally. Of course, there's ways you can give feedback that are better or worse, but understanding that feedback is important to you. And one key one, it's interesting, you can see people who get inspired by the success of others. They see people succeed and they're excited for them. And you see people that get jealous. And the reaction to be jealous of people who succeed is a fixed mindset thing, right? And wanting to try new things is a growth mindset, and sticking to what you know is fixed. So really what you want to do, especially, not just in your innovation team, but throughout your company, you really want more growth mindset people than fixed mindset people. Two companies, Google and Microsoft, have publicly talked about trying to create a management culture and management team that is far more on the growth mindset side, and they do that as a company. They've created things that they do, like having a company-wide innovation event and things like that. where they putting people on very difficult projects, stuff like that, to actually cultivate that growth mindset within the company. Rather than trying to build everybody the same way here, get growth mindset managers. So I think it's very important to have these growth leaders.
Yeah, and we're not, like you said, there's a lot of tools that you can use to help people move towards a growth mindset.
Right.
Because we're not all one or the other,
Right.
nor are we always on one or the
Right,
other.
true.
So lots of times little things happen throughout your life or in the organization, and you were previously a growth mindset, and for a period of time you might shift to less so. And then so, there's all this discussion about how future leaders really need to be attuned to the individual needs of their team, and how they better understand how they can help them. So we're really moving towards a lot more engagement. So we have to understand what's happening with people
Great
a lot
point.
more.
Very great point.
So intrapreneurship becomes really important.
Right. Yeah, so to me, they're very similar. There's very similar aspects between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. The main changes, of course, differences are, of course, that an entrepreneur the risk is all on them, right? They take the risk. They risk their own capital. They raise their own capital. They're independent. They're trying to create a company, and their motivation is to change a game, right? Is to actually change a market. Whereas an entrepreneur, the risk is actually the company's risk. Now, you could say that the entrepreneur has some risk. There's nothing you do that doesn't have some risk. But the real risk is the company's risk, right? The monetary risk. Things are company funded. They're reliant on the internal organization to get things done. They require a lot of political acumen to get things done. They leverage corporate resources, which is a power, by the way. That's something that they have that is an advantage. Their job is that they're looking to create value, and their motivation has to be intrinsic. Mm-hmm. Because quite often, this is a very hard job to make this change within companies, and quite often the only motivation you have is if you believe your company has to change.
Right.
That's intrinsic motivation. I believe this has to change so that my company will be successful.
Yeah, you have to establish a lot of systems where you encourage people, not an awful lot of bureaucracy and
Right.
always knows and all those kinds of things. Comes back to making sure that you've got the right setup for innovation that we've talked about before. So it's important then to develop leaders that are intrapreneurs.
Right.
What are some of the skills you're looking for?
Well, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship is one of my favorite organizations that teaches entrepreneurship to inner city youth. They're just a great organization. They have this model that talks about these different skills like flexibility and adaptability, future orientation, comfort with risk, being able to recognize opportunities, having initiative and self-reliance, not waiting for someone else to tell you what to do, being a great communicator and a collaborator, being creative and innovative, and having that critical thinking and problem solving, which to me is maybe the most important thing. If you look at those entrepreneurial mindset domains, those are if you have an entrepreneur who's a really good entrepreneur, they need all of these skills as well. They're just doing it within a company versus with their own company.
And every leader can develop all kinds of little projects or little ways to develop those skills of everyone in the organization, right? So, but it takes that will to say, well, okay, I want to have more intrapreneurs so that we have more innovation, and not just creativity, but actual innovation where people have thought about what it's going to take to develop some of those ideas. Right. So very important to not just make the commitment, but to have an implementation plan in terms of how you bring people along so that they can help you and be engaged. So you have this intrapreneur bunch of examples of assignments, I think, that fit exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah, as someone who spent 40-some years in different companies as a entrepreneur, I did a lot of these kinds of roles, whether it be leading a merger and acquisition or taking on some major IT business transformation project, a 3-4 year very difficult project, some of them much more than that, creating a new corporate function. All of these kind of assignments are things that will help you build stronger entrepreneurs, because these are all very hard jobs.
Right.
and they
And
grow different
innovators.
skills. That's right, and innovators. Because if you and when you get product service development, if you leave people in there for 20 years, move them around, move people around, give them opportunities. If there's an opportunity for geographic expansion, take someone who's shown signs of being a leader and give them some responsibility for helping with that geographic expansion. That will change your life. Those kind of assignments that we're looking at here on these slides are things that will change you as a person and grow you as a person and make you a better entrepreneur for other future assignments.
Exactly. So talk about some of those organizational challenges.
So a lot of organizations say they want to hire creative people or they want to hire innovators or things, but then they have the same old systems that they used to have with archaic succession plans and the same set of motivators for all people in the company when some people take 10 times the risk to their careers as other people. And it's like treating everyone the same, exactly the same. So organizations see both the opportunities and the threats. They say they need entrepreneurs to help identify the threats and lead efforts to make the change. And if you look at the great companies, when you look at their principles, you'll see in there, think like this is your business. Act like an entrepreneur. And that's what you're looking for. Then the traditional policies develop to support those existing business models and stop things from changing, because that's the way normal businesses work. They do everything they can so that nobody gets creative. Because creativity costs money,
Right.
supposedly. So they don't develop entrepreneurs, though. They develop more of what you've always had.
Right.
So that's your own fault for having those policies. And entrepreneurs often leave. I can't tell you how many times this happens, to join a competitor because they believe they'll be able to do something different there, which may or may not be the case, or to create a startup or join a startup to satisfy that need they have for change. So what's needed is a different model. You need to think of your model for your company, your HR model, and all the other models that you have for a different kind of employee. And that, if you want to create an entrepreneur force, like I said, with a lot of people who can actually help you create change, you have to look at your succession processes and your financial management, your incentives, your governance, all those things. What culture do you want? And then actually make some changes that will actually help people who are innovators build innovators and keep innovators.
And all in due time, right? Because I think what you've told me many times is that, panicking and saying, oh, we need all kinds of new entrepreneurs. Let's go out there and hire a bunch of young people that will come in and change the model. But then they don't have opportunities.
You manage them the same way you've always managed people from a different time.
Right.
And it just won't work.
No.
So you really need to look at these systems and not put Band-Aids on things. And I worked with a company one time who struggled with a work from home policy for years. And I can't understand why that would be the case. And it was for positions that could be done digitally. And guess what happened when we hit the pandemic? Suddenly we figured out a way for people to work from home, didn't we? Right? And now what's happening? People are still working from home, many people. So like I said, you have to change your systems.
I know in my own research with regards to that, the figures were astounding how many people, even before the pandemic, wanted the ability to work from home for at least a portion of the week.
Right.
But the problem was that managers didn't feel a sense of control and wouldn't allow it.
It's a lack of trust. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think they figured out quite quickly during this pandemic that our productivity is just as good, if not better, when we have those choices that we can make as individuals.
Yep.
So let's talk about a few next steps. We're talking about leadership. So you've gone through a strategy, making a list of what you want to be doing. Now under leadership, you want to think in terms of what you have in terms of innovation leaders, where you might want to make some changes and adding or providing opportunities for people to become innovation leaders, to look at your policies, your procedures, the way that you incentivize people and so forth. Right. So we have developing that growth mindset is there. So do you want to talk a little bit about those last few points?
Yeah, I think one of the main things for me is also knowing where you need help. So taking an internal entrepreneur who has never led in an innovation team before and just having them start to do it, she will struggle.
Yeah.
And it'll take a lot longer. So who do you hire to help? Not to do it, to help, right? And the objective is not to become completely reliant, hooked on some consulting company. The idea is to bring somebody in who would genuinely help you. Somebody like a strategizer or using LPK to help define your group. But those organizations can really help you go faster and bring your internal entrepreneur, make their job much, not easier, but allow them to go faster.
Right. And if you're a really small organization that can't afford to bring in the outside consultants, just starting to go through the steps of thinking about all of these issues and how you will handle them will get you on your way, right?
Plus, there are tons of free resources now. When I, 6, 7 years ago, there weren't these resources. Now there's an incredible number of resources, free resources even, that are available that will help you as well.
Right. Thank you, Al. Another very useful list of advice and tools that people can use.
Thank you.
All right.